From the Opepco Studios in Oklahoma City, you're watching The Press Row. I'm Jenny Carlson here with Barry Trammell. Time for our weekly inbox segments. Questions come in via email and we answer them here on video. This week we're going to talk about James Harden, Big 12 expansion, upside down horns. But let's get started with Texas A&M. Gig 'em, right? All right, Jerry has a question for us. Jerry says, has any college head coach ever stepped into a better coaching gig than Kevin Sumlin? Johnny Manziel was already recruited and redshirted. Offensive line talent is abundant. Defense has enough playmakers at Texas A&M. What about that, Barry?
Well, I don't know. Barry Switzer took over and found, as head coach, found three Selman brothers on his defensive line and Joe Washington in the backfield. Urban Meyer took over at Florida and had Tim Tebow and Chris Leak at quarterback. So lots of coaches have come into prime position. So good for Kevin Sumlin. He's done an excellent job. I think he's changed the attitude maybe as much as anything at Texas A&M. But let's go a little slow on the Aggies. This is A&M's history. Boom and bust. Mike Sherman, Dennis Francione, they all had their high marks. They all had great periods of optimism with quick falls. So let's not be too quick to buy on Kevin Sumlin.
Well, and I think, too, it's important to remember that in the SEC, the Ags have had some nice wins and even a marquee win a couple weeks ago, but it's week in, week out. The wear and tear on a program in the SEC is pretty remarkable. And I'm not saying it's not tough in the Big 12. Obviously, the polls and the computers out there say the Big 12 is the toughest football conference in the country. So you can't, we can have a debate about SEC or Big 12 and how tough it is. But the SEC, it's so physical, so grinding. This is year one for the Ags and Kevin Sumlin in that league. I agree, Barry. Yes, he's got some talent, but they're going to have to really get used to that week in, week out. And we haven't seen it just yet from him. That's still a work in progress. All right, back to the inbox. This one from Lynn. Lynn says, I thought the reason that people gesture with the hook 'em horns upside down is to disrespect the Texas Longhorns. What about that, Barry? What about that, Mac Brown?
Well, Lynn's got a great point. What Mac Brown says when Mac says it's disrespectful, yeah, no freaking kidding. That's exactly right. But, Mac has a point in that I think this whole talk about, whether this should be a penalty or not, it's all situational. If Tom Wart lays a big hit on Jonathan Gray in the OU Texas game and, right there on top of him, goes with the down horns, yeah, that's unsportsmanlike, I'd flag him. But if Tom Wart makes an interception and runs off the field, running to his teammates going like that, he's not trying to instigate the other squad. So I think to address this with a specific rule is crazy. Just take it case by case, and if someone is trying to instigate ill will, throw a flag. Otherwise, leave it alone.
Yeah, and in the aftermath of this, we talked to some people, coaches, players at OU, and basically the reaction was, well, we don't do that anyway in games. Now, obviously, after the game, before the game, those sorts of things, yeah, of course, we see players do it. We have pictures. We have video evidence of this. Obviously it happens, but yeah, if a guy taunts somebody and it includes the upside down horns, or if it includes a throat slash, or it includes whatever it is, it's going to be a penalty. But, if Mac Brown wants to try to regulate what the fans do, come on. If that's really what he's trying to do, because to me, I don't see it in the game, during the action of the game so much. You see it in the stands. Now, if Mac's trying to fix that, I think he's got bigger problems to worry about.
I think he's just worried about players on the field.
Okay.
And apparently Tech has been doing some of that when they played. Who would have thought? Getting rowdy in Lubbock. But anyway, one of his guys got penalized for the mocking the Texas Tech symbol. Yeah. But that was more of a celebration type penalty. So Mac has a point. I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but he does have a point that there are times when that is inflammatory and should be penalized, but not a blanket rule, no way.
Okay, all right, back to the inbox. This one from Reg. Reg says, will Kansas State potentially getting the short straw this year because they play one less game than Oregon be enough to reignite expansion talk, and would the Big 12 suits change their view? Obviously, Barry, the Oregon Pac-12. Pac-12 has a championship game, a title game. The Big 12 does not. Is there a point to be made here?
No. This will not change the Big 12 view. Let me tell you what, the new college football playoff plan, 2014, 4 teams, that has bedrocked the Big 12 in its belief that 10 teams is the right way to go. I think the Big 12 believes that its champion in a 4-team playoff will almost always be involved. No reason to muddy the waters with a championship game. I don't see expansion to 12. Now, I can see 11. I don't see 12 with divisions and a playoff game anytime in the near future.
And here's the truth about the way the Big 12 has set things up. They've still got games going on that championship weekend. You'll see the SEC championship game, the Pac-12 championship game, all those leagues that have championship games. The Big 12 will still be playing. K-State will play against Texas that final week. Now, obviously, Texas is not the Texas of a few years ago, but let's say they go out and beat them like they beat West Virginia. I mean, who's to say that that's not highly probable? That's a pretty good final statement, you know, whether you're in a Big 12 championship game or a regular season game. And I'm not sure anybody's going to say, Oregon played 13 and they played 12. I think it's how they finish out, and they could finish out real strong.
And what you say is right. Playing on that last Saturday, that December Saturday, is what's important. Don't have a bye week on that December Saturday.
Yeah, Big 12 made sure of that. All right, back to the inbox one last time. This one from Kent. Kent says, would the Thunder have signed James Harden if he had a better finals versus Miami? Interesting question, because James Harden did not play well in the finals.
Did not play well, and the answer is no. Yeah. They would not have. Here's the Thunder's view of James Harden. They love James. They think he's a wonderful player. They want him on their team. They would have backed up the vault if they could have to James Harden. They just couldn't. Let me tell you who's worth jewels and diamonds and furs and whatever you can lavish on someone. My wife. But guess what? I can't afford it. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really determine what somebody's worth. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. The Thunder could not afford to pay Durant a max contract, Westbrook a max contract, Serge Ibaka, $12.5 million a year, and James Harden a max contract. Yeah. They couldn't afford it. Yeah. It was an easy call. They're not the federal government. They don't write checks that bounce here in Oklahoma City.
We don't print money either, last we checked. Yeah, and the other thing is that James Harden was after, or so we've found out, it was after a 5-year deal. He wanted the max of the max. And under this new collective bargaining agreement, which I don't want to get too deep into it because goodness knows I'd get lost there, but under this new collective bargaining agreement, teams can only sign one guy to that 5-year max deal. They already had a guy that filled that spot, Russell Westbrook. So they couldn't actually sign Harden to what he ultimately wanted. That was just out of their hands entirely. And Barry, as you mentioned, you know, then you start to say, well, what could they have given him? It would have still stretched them in a way that, frankly, they were willing to go there, but it would have been really interesting to see how it would have gone in years to come. You know, the revenue streams look good right now, but what happens if it dries up a little bit? You're going to be paying a ton of money to a very few guys. Can you make the rest of the roster fill out? Would have been wildly interesting to find out. Hey, be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoma.